Welcome to a very different Fallout episode from me. Fallout 4 was my first Fallout game and my first single-player RPG. I fell in love with this character, Nick Valentine. He's one of the companions you can take along with you during your journey through Fallout 4. I highly, highly recommend the game. He's the moral compass of the game, and he makes the journey that much more interesting and exciting as you travel the Commonwealth. I also have a great love of action figures, especially the 12-inch G.I. Joes. So when I wanted a Nick Valentine figure, because there wasn't one, I decided to make my own. And here he is. One of my husband's co-workers sculpted in 3D his face, hat, and hand. And this is the final product. I'm going to show you step by step how you can take the resin print and turn it into a figure like this. Also, how to detail all this clothing, how to weather it, how to paint it. I am not an artist by any means, and this is extremely easy to do. For 2 years, I have procrastinated on this project, so it's nice to finally see Nick completed. So come along for the full journey, and I'm going to show you how to make your own Nick Valentine. So here's a look at the actual 3D sculpt. And as you can see, the modeler actually did all of the detail on the inside of Nick's skull. So it's a lot, you can get a paintbrush in there and can paint the individual details, and you can actually see right through. Also, I wanted the hat separate. I didn't want it molded with the head sculpt, so I could take the hat off and on, paint it separately, and also be able to tilt it backwards, forward, give him a different look. Because believe me, just a slight tilt gives the character model a whole different perspective, whole different look. And also, I had my husband model his right hand. It was extremely difficult to model, and we ended up having to change to an ABS resin because the piece was so fragile. So here's a look at the process of the actual 3D printing. And the brand is called Anycubic, and it's a photon printer. I think now they might be around $100, something like that. I know they had a sale, and I know there's other models that came after this one. I think this one's about 4 years old, that you can get more updated ones with a better light system in them. But this one does just fine for us right now. So after about 3 hours, you can go ahead and take the print out of the printer. This is a water wash resin. You can use this. When we did the ABS like hands, it has to be washed with isopropyl alcohol. So here's a look at the Nick heads. It took about 3 hours to do these. Like I said, it's not an upgraded printer. And the next step is the actual water wash process. Makes it a whole lot easier not having to deal with the alcohol, especially in such quantities. I've made 20 prints of both the head sculpt, the hands, and the hats. So it is a very simple lukewarm water. Rinse them thoroughly, especially because most of the head is hollow, and then just dip it in and out of the water and dispose of it properly. And the next step is to remove the 3D prints from the build plate. And I just have a little scraper here. They just pop right off. Now, before you do the curing or cooking, they should be dry. You can either leave them out in the sun if you don't have a curing machine, or just use a hairdryer, but not on super hot. Now, as you can see, it doesn't have a lot of detail, but once it's dry and has its first coat of primer, it brings out the detail in the sculpt. So you'll notice that later. It's like, wow, this doesn't have any detail at all. It's there, it's just not showing. Now, since the making of this video, I've learned to actually dry the prints, either with a hairdryer or just let them dry naturally before they hit the curing process. I haven't noticed any difference in quality whatsoever. It's just another step that I've added in the process correctly now. And it's very important to do that when you're doing with the ABS, like when you're doing like the alcohol wash. So here we go. You can go ahead and set this for whatever time you want. On this machine, it's like 2, 4, 6 minutes. So I was doing about 4 minutes spin on the heads because they're pretty solid. Then I kind of tip them over on their sides. And there you can see the build material. I don't know if I told you about that. That's to keep it stable because it's actually, as you saw, hanging upside down during the build process. So I left all that build material in there. You can go ahead and paint it sitting on the build material or cut it all away and do all of your painting and detailing after that process. Next up, you're going to need a pair of these. They're model sprue cutters. Don't use a pair of scissors. The blades are too wide and they can't get close enough. So obviously the less build material you can remove from it, the less sanding you have to do. And here's what it looks like. I got it cut pretty close. I couldn't show it on camera, sorry. Yeah, so you can choose to leave it on the build material and paint the head, at least the front part, that way. But your next step is to actually use, I use these for all of my sanding. It's a 120 grit sanding block. Just soak it in some water because believe me, it is a lot easier to clean up. There's no dust whatsoever. You just sand away and it leaves just like a little film on it that you can rinse off. So you're trying to get the little build material bits that are sticking up. Don't do the front of the face or anything, just the back of the head, because that's primarily where all of the build material would be. And after it is thoroughly dried, you can go ahead and use primer. I use Rust-Oleum brand flat white primer. I buy it at Walmart. It's cheap and it works great. You want to do it in very light coats. It is a nice warm day outside. The can has been sitting out, so the can's a bit warm too. Shake it really well and do extremely light coats to begin with. Because remember, you're going to be putting layer after layer of detail paint on top. But this is the most important layer. You want it to stick all the paint, all the acrylics really well. And don't worry about getting into those little nooks and crannies. And I've not had any problems with the paint sticking. Now I use these paints, and later on I'll show you the difference between, these are Artist's Loft brand. They can be purchased at any of the Michael's craft stores. And then this is the really inexpensive paint I really don't want you to use except for the whites and grays that I use for dabbing actually on the heads, putting the coats on. And these are a few other tools that I use. This is a kitchen scrubber, some coarse sandpaper, and some very fine. But these are where you get your detail. You go to Walmart and you buy a bag of these sea sponges, and I'm going to show you how you use these to get detail that you can't get out of brushes, especially this one. It has lots of little air pockets, so it's really great for dabbing paint on and getting details you can't get with brushes. Gloves and the hairdryer. I also had to buy an iron for all of this, and your paint tray. And we're ready to go. Let's start. This is one that has its primer completely dry. And I'm going to just move everything a little closer. Sometimes the stuff's going to go in and out of focus. It's a really sensitive camera. So this is the cheap dollar paint. It's okay to use it because we're not using it for anything. It's going to be pretty much covered up. I'm adding a little bit of gray because it's already white. I want to slowly get the character darker layers. And you can still go back. Whoops, here we go. And for the first time, my husband would be so proud. I've labeled my brushes because I had a problem. You can see the pink in the bottom left corner. I had a little pink left, red left on the brush and didn't clean it well enough. So yeah, I ruined a whole pile of white paint. So here I am trying to get a little darker than the primer. I'm just adding little bits of gray just to see what this is. Don't worry, I won't be blobbing this whole bit on it. It'll dry off. I'll use it for something else. I just want to see how dark it is. It needs to get a little bit darker. And let's see. I also use one of the dish drying mats. It keeps the paint tray from moving around. You can hear off camera I've got a little jar of water, but there I can use it just to dry off the brushes real quick. And it's easy. So here we go. Let's dry. Let's see. That is just enough for a light color of gray on him. We're not too particular. I really want to get this paint inside. There we go. So it's just a really quick coat. And like I said, having the hairdryer handy, it does blow everything everywhere. So you'll see a whole bunch of stuff go flying. But it works really well, and it makes your painting process go a whole lot faster. And there we go. So this is just a really, really light dusting of paint for your first coat. And you can dab it off there like that. So you want to get the paint off your brush and use it to remove more of the paint off the figure. Yep, sorry about the focusing there. Okay. So just very light. You don't want to put too many layers on him. Okay, let's get the hairdryer out. And I moved the head off camera because I realized I was actually drying out the paint in the paint tray. So yeah, there's something else I learned. Like I said, this is the first time doing any of this stuff. So yeah, bear with me. So now we're going to go a little bit darker. Then I realized this paint is pretty old, or the kids have used it. Yeah, it's gross. Let me get a better, yeah, it's time for me to go back to Walmart and get some better paint. Okay, here we go. Now again, it's too much paint. Let me just bring in a piece of paper here. This is not what we want. We want it very dry, even drier than what you can see on the piece of paper. This is our dry brush technique that we'll be using to get all the layers. And you can see that's what we want right there. Just small amount of paint, very, very fine, very thin. Okay, let's bring him back in. And get it again, because I used it all up, that just demonstrating there on the paper. So just take your time. You want just very light. This is a very fine brush, very, that's fine, I don't know, light. Don't know much about brushes, but yeah, I also buy all my brushes at Walmart. You can get a pack of various sizes. You want some very, very fine tips for doing the eyes and things, and some wide, fluffy, that's the word, fluffy brushes. To do your dry brush techniques. And remember, Nick is quite a few years old, so having little bumps and holes on the back of his head and little, errors that may not have sanded out well, don't worry about it. It all works. It just works. Okay, so there's our second layer right there. Starting to get definition in the cheeks and the chin and everything. And there's the model that I did before that I'm kind of following. So we're slowly building a little bit darker as we go. I ended up adding a little bit of black to the paint to make it a darker gray, because actually I didn't have a good gray paint, a darker paint. Oh, there, we're getting way too much on. So again, let's dry it out a little bit. And we can see in the background me trying to get it there. Okay, and we can also do around the edge of his faceplate, around the top of his skull, and that makes it stand out really nice. Don't worry, we're getting to the sponges next. That's the fun part. Okay, let's add a little bit of water to the paint tray, and I'll show you the sponge technique. Okay, let's get that sponge. What I had to do was first soak the sponge in water just to kind of get it to soften up a little bit. Make sure you keep all of your paint trays and especially your water container clean all the time, especially after you switch colors. At least I'm still in the grays. There I am. And just, see how much it soaked that up. It's still not enough. The sponge was still too not soft enough to gather the paint. So we'll just add even more of our dirty water there. Get the sponge perfect. It's probably going to be an hour-long video at this rate. Sorry. Okay, we're getting a little bit of a pattern there, you can see, but it's best test it out on a piece of paper. You're lightly dabbing it. You're not pressing too hard, and it's going to absorb the paint quickly, so I'm going to have to go and get some more paint on it. So I'm happy with the way it looks. Very light dabs, and it can be multiple colors. There we go. So that is perfect. That's exactly the pattern we're looking for. You can't get that with a brush. That's why sponges are so good. Now, we're going to just pick some select areas. Don't go crazy. Don't go all over the head sculpt doing it. Just in select areas where you want to see what you're doing, which obviously you can't because my camera can't focus today. All right, let's pull out a little bit there and see what we can see. I think I do show it. My apologies. Okay. Okay. I'm just getting a little bit different colored paints. This paint, acrylic paint, dries really, really fast. Okay, let's see if we can see it here better. There we go. Now remember, if you don't like it, you can always paint over it. That's the nice thing about acrylic paint. Okay, let's back up the camera here so we can see how we're doing. There we go. A little bit of different painting techniques. And if it's too much, you can take a perfectly dry one, or you can just take my brush is just slightly wet enough to lift the paint. And so I felt that it was a little too dark, so I'm just going to do a very light white brush here. I'm just trying to get it to show on my glove to make sure I don't have too much paint. Yeah, there's a good dry brush. So now I'm just going to go over little bits of it. You see how it brings out the cheek there? You've got your layers coming in, and that's what you want. You don't want it to look as one even paint job because he's a well-worn character. So there. A little bit more. Don't be afraid to get in there and mess around with your painting techniques. And there we go. And now we're going to skip ahead to show you how to do a wash. I tried painting Nick's eyes with a very solid color, and it just looked awful. It looked like dead eyes. So I'm using this burnt umber paint, same set. We just need a little bit, and I'm just going to show you how to do just the slightest amount of a wash to go into his eyeballs. So I've got a really nice small brush. So if you were just to go ahead and paint his eyes, they're going to be very, very dark like that, and I found it very difficult to paint. So if you just add a little drop or two of water and then add a little paint to that until you get the consistency you want, like that kind of a color, make it as even as you can, that's perfect right there. Of course, I had to add more to mess with it, but it's already drying out the paper. I'm going to run out. Okay, let's bring him in, and I'll show you. It might be a little bit out of focus. I did a couple of these so you guys could see how easy it is. Now, this is perfect for showing how nice that this model was. You're just going to drop it on the eyeball and let the paint flow so it fills the whole eye socket. And stop my hands from shaking. Too many coffees today. There we go. See how it's just moving by itself because the paint is thin. Now you can continue to do layer after layer till you get the look you're looking for. You can wipe it away with your finger. You can use the edge of a paper towel, Kleenex, whatever. Let's see if we can show. Right now that one's a little too full. There. You can brush it in. I like to try to dab it on the eye and let it flow over. And you can see there's too much there. Oh, maybe not. There we go. A little too much, I think. Let's see. There we go. That one, it's showing really, really well. That one has too much. So you can dry off your brush, put your brush back down, and you see how it absorbed it? It was a little out of focus. It just absorbed the paint right up out of the socket. So there you go. The one on the right is infinitely better than the one on the left. Go ahead and put another bit of layering in there. And you do the same technique for his lips too. I tried using black, but it was just too dark. And it's easier to do it in layers of brown than it is anything else. Let's see if I can get it right in there. There we go. See, it filled it really nice. And if you're happy with it, go ahead and hit it with the hairdryer. Here I'm trying again to show you this one. And I think I used the paper towel with this one. That one definitely worked out well. And it's trial and error. Just take your time. That one on the left definitely needs a little bit of it removed. And next up is the yellow for his eyes. I let it thoroughly dry with the hairdryer. And this one you're going to use full strength. You do not want to do a wash because that'll just fill the eye cavity with yellow and you don't want that. So take your best fine pointed brush. Make sure it's nice and dry. And you're going to dab the yellow. You want to go straight down with the brush. And you can practice doing the dots. Remember, this is not a wash. This is full strength. You want to get, see how the brush is bending? You want to just be able to tap it on the eye. Let me get enough paint on it. So you just dab straight down. Same thing. If it doesn't work the first time, and I've done some of these eyes 3 or 4 times, I'm using my index finger there. There, perfect, perfect. My index finger is steadying my hand. And you may have to do a couple of dabs. You may have to do it again over and over. That is pretty good. Let's do the next one. I'm trying to get it in focus too. Okay, this one, sometimes you can maneuver the brush around in a little circle to try to get everything. So that is perfect right there. And we're going to let, whoop, I went one dab too much. Nope. We'll see. See, just a little bit too much and it'll ruin it. Let's bring in our model to see how they're comparing. Not bad, not bad. It's getting there. And the one on the right, you can see I used the black paint for the irises. So this time we're going to use the burnt umber paint. And again, it is a full strength paint. And again, use your index finger to steady your hand. And you're just pushing in there and doing it. So yeah, it's missing a little ink off the top. So it's close. See if I can improve it. If not, then I just dry it out and do it again. That's not bad. And sometimes you get one perfect and one wonky. You'll know it when you see it, that it just doesn't work. That's perfect. I should have left it alone. But no, I had to make it. My hand is shaking so much. All right, I'd say that's pretty good. At least it demonstrates the technique right there. And that one kind of went off to the side a little bit. Okay, you get the basic procedure for doing the heads. Go ahead and, as you can see, I magically ended up with a whole new tube of burnt umber. I actually started with the hats. Okay, first off, I wanted to show you the difference in quality between some of these paints. This is the burnt umber, and yes, it looks like crap. When it dries, it's going to look really nice. The one on the left is our first coat that's actually dried. And the one on the right is the second coat, and I used the sponge again to get it a little less brushy looking. There's our sponge. So not this wider one, but you can see I try to hold the sponge and the camera at the same time. Just lightly dab it. You don't want it to look too spongy because the third coat you can start to brush away some of the sponge look and then start bringing in the highlights. There's a few that are in the drying process right there with a little black highlights from another sponge. You can cut them up, use some for different purposes. That's how there's a lot of water in some of these with the burnt umber paint, and they're all at various stages. I was really happy with how they turned out. When they're dry, they look completely different. So let's speed ahead and let me show you the difference in paint qualities because I was kind of shocked about that. And this is how beautiful the burnt umber one dried. I put some little black highlights on very lightly with this paint. It was absolutely gorgeous. Then I decided, I'm going to try that cheap, apple barrel paint. And there it is, chocolate bar color. I thought, okay, maybe this will be okay. It might look different. That's the first coat on the right. Very monotone. And there it is with a second coat and some very basic black highlights. And it looked like garbage. It really did. When I compared the quality of the paints side by side right there, the one on the right still needs a little bit of work, but you look at it, the chocolate bar actually looks like a chocolate bar. But the Artist Loft paints seem to have a lot more quality and definition to it. So there you go. You get what you pay for. And next up, we're going to move on to Nick's shoes. Now, these are two other Rust-Oleum products I use. You'll see these on the shelves. They're both the same. You want matte clear. You don't want any kind of shiny clear. And the Ultra Cover, it just has the same amount of paint in a can, but they say it's twice the amount of coverage. I was just checking to see one I got out of the garage and it was still cold. Shake them up a lot outside. So I have these shoes for Nick, and they look too new. Now, I can't sand them down because they're a black plastic with brown paint on top. So what I'm going to do is shoot a couple of layers of matte clear on them to give something for the paint to stick to. Now, here you can see on the right, I did the dry brush using the burnt umber paint and just a little bit of black. So it's got some kind of, it's lost its shininess, and now I have paint layers that I can expose as I use sandpaper or the scrubber. Let me see if I can get it in focus. Okay, I'm going to show you the technique. The one on the left is one that I just clear coated, and the one on the right I started just by adding a little bit of black and brown together and do a really nice light dry brush technique on it. So let's show you the one on the left. And I do a little bit here. You can mix colors together. That's the fun part. You know, a little bit of blacks, a little bit of browns, and you can see I'm using very, very little paint. And just too much there, just wipe it off. Let it dry with the hair dryer, whatever. You can start to see, and I apologize again for the focus issues. Okay. Let's put them side by side. And then using that very fine sandpaper, just go over the edges that normally would have wear, like the tips of the shoes, the heels, the sides, bring out the laces. The one on the right, you can see that some of the paint is gone. Let me just clean it off a little bit. So there you go. It's all these small details that you've got to take the time to do if you want the figure to look good. And now we get to use the school glue. White school glue dries clear, so we're going to put some on the shoe where we want some dirt. You can use chalks instead of actual dirt, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put some white glue on the shoes, and we're going to add some dirt to the shoes. So just go ahead and just brush it on in the areas that you want things to stick to. Now you go ahead and put probably twice as much glue and dirt as you think you need, because it may or may not stick right away. And when you add the clear coat on top to fix it, it will lose about half of its definition. And here we are adding a little bit more glue. We've got some dirt from the backyard, and you can either roll it in there or just pick it up and kind of place it on the top. And if it's too much, just when it's all dry, you can just rub off if you find that there's too much. I've got too much leaves and scrub from the ground on it. Okay, so we'll let this one just knocked it off a little bit. Let it sit, let it dry. And don't forget Nick's left hand. It would have come with the actual figure body. It's a different type of plastic, so it took about 2 or 3 coats of primer and letting it dry really well. It was tacky for almost 2 days before it could take paint. So yeah, that's a process that you've got to let, and it's not detailed. I just managed to try to get the paint. I've got to go back in and fill the socket and everything. And here is the original resin, and then the upgraded one on the right. Color does not matter. Just to show you, the fingers were kind of flexible, but then here at the back, a little bit too much painting, and it just snaps right off. So this is the one item that we upgraded from normal resin to ABS-like resin. So it's a lot softer and more flexible. You can see right there that you won't have a problem painting it. Look at that. It's great. So that is the upgraded hands for Nick Valentine. And now it's time to go shopping on eBay. This is the type of, and I am not leaving links to any specific vendors at all, except for my link to where I sell the heads, hats, and hand set. All you have to do is search 1/6 scale male figure body and narrow shoulders. Now, there's all kinds of types here, but you see the head plug. That is exactly what you want instead of a figure that has an actual neck, because it won't fit. I will also send, I think there's a close-up. I think it's ZY Toys sells the least expensive. I think it was around $20. It comes with extra hands that you can paint, all left hands, right hands. Obviously not the right hands, but he's fully posable, everything. So there's all kinds of these on the net, but look for the one with that of the figure plug on the top of the neck so it can fit. And these ones are around $20. You do not want the muscle body because it makes it a little difficult to fit some of the clothing. The shirt and pants were a very tight fit on the normal. You can see in the bottom right, it says B002, B001 from ZY Toys, that company. Everything fit very nicely, no problem. And there again, you can see the proper head plug for it. This one, do not buy. This will not fit the head sculpt that I have. Will not fit. And now on to clothing, the iconic trench coat. You're looking for 1/6 scale long trench coat. And a lot of these are coming from China, so expect delays in shipping. Some are located here in the United States, and other ones will take a couple of weeks, sometimes an extra month before you actually see your product arrive to you. So the trench coat's a definite. And again, these are examples of what to look for. So we're looking for a white dress shirt and a tie without the elastic band around the tie. So this one's about $37.93. A lot of times you can get a really good deal if you put it on your watch list, and within 24 to 48 hours, more than likely they're going to offer you 5% off, 10% off. But these pants to me were too light, but if it's fine for you, buy the suit. So it'll cover the belt, the tie, the shirt, and the pants. And then the trench coat goes all over everything else. And the last thing you need is a pair of shoes. And these shoes have to have the socket, the ball socket, to fit the leg post that comes with the figure. So these ones are around $12. So totaling everything up, you're probably going to be spending around $60 to $80 depending on what you purchase. And after everything arrives in the mail, it is time to start to detail all of the clothing for Nick's figure. This is the fun part. I like painting. It was my first time, doing that much painting. But when it comes to detailing clothing items, this is the fun part for me because there's so many things that you can do. And first off, you want to remove any of the sizing. It's kind of a finish that they put on fabrics and clothing. So go ahead and wash everything. You can use soap, a little soap if you want. It's no problem. Just not a lot of it. You don't want it to have a finish on it. So maybe soap isn't a great idea. Anyways, soak it all really well and crumple it up really well. You want this clothing of his to look rumpled and weathered. And this is the first step. And this, you can do so much detail on these items of clothing. You're going to see it. We're going to do all the patches. We're going to do the weathering stains, some sewing, some cutting, everything. So this is the next step, the fun part. And do everything, including all the belts, everything. Because we'll be running sandpaper on this and rubbing it on all kinds of abrasive surfaces, sandpaper, sanding blocks, the wall. Okay, let's get some soap going in here, just a little bit. I didn't use that much that would affect anything. So again, get it all nice and squishy soft. Wring it out really good. You can go ahead and rinse it again if you want. There we go. Okay, that's all done. Try to get as much of the water off as you can. You want them all still ready to do its detailing. Okay, we'll just squeeze out the rest onto a towel here. And now let's kind of think about what we want to do. We're looking for some abrasive surfaces to kind of run these over. I was really happy the way the pants turned out. So next up is the unfinished basement wall. Yeah, it worked. It really did. Any surface that is not smooth, that just got detailed. It's fun to do this stuff. It's going to cause tiny rips and tears in the surface and take off the sheen off the clothing to give it that weathered look. I wonder I didn't lose a fingernail. And let's use the edges here a little bit, see what we get. There we go. And I did the same with both the trench coat and the shirt. So there you can see some weathering, dust and everything. And once you're happy with what you see, just let it dry. Naturally. Do not put it in the dryer. You do not want any of this clothing to shrink at all, else you'll never get it onto the figure. Maybe you'll be okay with the trench coat, not. Anyways, what I also did, I didn't show on camera, is I ended up soaking this shirt in instant coffee, hot instant coffee, and it gave it a really nice tannin look to it. And again, here's the trench coat. I wasn't completely happy with what I had using the wall downstairs, so we're going to try some sandpaper and the sanding block, and I got really good results. Right there you can see a little bit of what happened using the cement wall, but using this is infinitely better. You're going to have more control. You can actually see it as you do it. There we go. So we want more of this, especially along the coat tail. And there you can see it's doing its job. And I'm probably ruining my kitchen countertop. Better stop and move it. There you can see. I want those. Yeah, I better move. So yeah, let's just bring out another one of these towels, continuing. And again, the fabric is still wet. Kind of damp, but enough that it's not going to cause dust and everything. And you're going to get a nice look to this. Let's do a little bit here on the front without removing the buttons. I think that's how I lost one of the buttons on the inside. You just got to be careful. Just taking off the newness while you weather. It's amazing I didn't lose. There we go. That's the other nice thing about these sanding blocks is they bend going around in there. Okay, here we go. Another section. Right around the areas too that you would expect where pockets, elbows, things like that. There you go. Now it's time to detail Nick's trench coat. And again, at Walmart, they have this great selection of iron-on patches. I actually had to spend $11 on the iron because I don't own one. Anyways, let's go ahead and find some photo reference, and let's get, it's not his coat without the patches, and there were, I think, 3 patches I had to cut and iron on. Here's my photo reference. So we got one on the left sleeve, and it's a good thing I am the world's worst seamstress, because yeah, my sewing looks about as bad as this does. But having the photo reference nearby really helps. I'm also going to do those little slices in the back shoulders and sew those up too. So there's a lot to do. I chose some brown and some black, so let's go ahead and iron these on real quick. Okay, let's start with the left upper arm. Right there, and I've already cut the patch out that you saw, and It is working its way. I haven't used an iron in years. That's what dryers are for. There we go. Okay, that's the first one. I'm not going to show all of them. There is my pathetic sewing job. Yes, yes, that's showing my sewing. And I tried to make it look bad too, which was pretty easy for me. And there's the stitching that's on the back of the jacket. I thought it turned out okay. And don't forget your weathering pass on everything, especially these little patches I'll show you in 1 second. With this one, again, I used my trusty sandpaper. The one on the left has got a few scuffs of sandpaper, sanding block on it, and the one on the right, there again, my 120 block, and the one on the right is the original patch. And honestly, 3 or 4 little scuffs with the sanding block just gives it that weathered look. So take the time to make your figure look good. And here we are in the final process. There are still some areas that I need to work on, but now we're at the assembly portion. It's up to you whether you want to use CA glue, super glue, or hot glue. I chose the hot glue because if I ever want to change something out, like I break a hand or something, all I have to do is get the hairdryer in the area. It'll melt the glue enough for me to pop it right out. And you don't need much glue. Now, I've posed his hand because I want his hand to come across the front of his body. So I wanted to make sure that I positioned it correctly. And then be careful putting it in and let it dry naturally. There, I wanted it to be across his chest like that. To pose like that, to hold a weapon. I mean, obviously it can't bend anything, but yeah, it's close enough. And let's get the head attached. Now, I did go back and figure, I put in way too much glue when I did this. That was way too much because it ended up hardening very quickly, and I couldn't get the head to sit completely onto the neck post, or the post. We'll call it a post. And I did open up the clothing and continue the paint job down into there. But yeah, it was a bit of a struggle to get this on, and I was not taking the clothing off. The clothing was tough to get on and to get it all situated. So just a little bit of firm pressure here, and I just had to undo the top button on the shirt, getting the shirt. And you can see a little bit of the coffee stained shirt too. Here's a better look at the head going onto the body. And this time I used a dab of hot glue. Just a dab. There we go. Don't fill it up too much because it just didn't work. Okay, let's get the head attached to the body. Just give it a little bit of firm pressure, a little twisting there to get it around, and a nice tight fit there, no gaps. And I did go ahead, and with your figure, the same thing. Do a little bit of primer on the upper body of the figure around where the neck connects. And here with the hat, just because I'll be taking a lot of photographs, I don't want his hat tipping around, but you can pose it the way you want it. Hit it with a little dab of hot glue. Now again, removing the hat may take some of the paint off the top of his head, but you can just touch it back up again. And there we go. We want to get him looking good. And the look to me was when I put the hat on him. This is a couple of weeks worth of work right here. And add a little pressure, get the glue to move around a bit. Ended up realizing I had his hat on in reverse. There's no way to tell. No way to tell. It painted, the other painted side looked so much better. So there we have it. And the project has truly been a labor of love. This has been a multi-year process full of procrastination and not thinking that I could actually do this and have it look as good as the finished product is. And I still have little bits to tweak around his neck and put some more detail in there, in behind his faceplate. But I got his hat on in the right direction because I ended up doing a little bit of rub on the top of the hat to give it a little bit more detail. And that's what he looks like now. He looks like a weathered Nick Valentine. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the extremely long video. I'll leave links in the description below where you can go to my eBay store and purchase the head, hat, and hands, either painted or unpainted. Any questions or comments, leave them below and I will gladly answer them. Thank you so very much for watching.